Shocker in Miami, Judge Chen's humiliation plan backfires. Pam Bondi. His stunning courtroom takeover leaves everyone speechless. The Miami federal courthouse pulsed with raw energy that morning, a charged atmosphere that promised something unforgettable. Reporters packed the gallery shoulder to shoulder, laptops balanced on their knees, pens scratching furiously, phones ready to capture every moment. The crowd hadn't gathered for just any case. This was a showdown of giants. Pam Bondi, Florida's fierce former attorney general, against Judge Edward Chen, a man known for swinging his gavel like a war hammer. Whispers had circulated for weeks. Chen was out to destroy Bondi, to humiliate her before the legal world. But what unfolded in Courtroom would leave everyone stunned, a masterclasses in strategy that flipped the script and shattered expectations. At exactly 9 a.m., the bailiff's voice boomed, "All rise." Judge Edward Chen swept into the courtroom, his black robe flowing like a dark cloud, his face carved with a permanent scowl, scanned the room with a flicker of contempt. He climbed the bench, barely acknowledging the packed gallery, his eyes locking onto Pam Bondi at the defense table. She was a picture of precision navy suit, flawless posture, unshakable, her silent, a weapon of its own. She flipped through her notes, her expression unreadable, as if she held a secret the room couldn't guess. "Ms. Bondi," Chen said, his voice cutting through the silence, loud enough to make reporters lean forward. "I see you're defending today. That surprises me." His words weren't casual. They were a challenge meant to rattle the gallery, stirred, pens moving faster. A few journalists exchanged glances. This wasn't an ordinary opening. This was war. "Yes, Your Honor." Bondi replied, her voice steady. As stone and lead counsel for the defense, Chen adjusted his glasses, peering at the file before him with a smirk. "Well, let's hope your preparation exceeds your last time in my courtroom. We wouldn't want another display." The insult landed hard. Everyone knew what he meant years ago. In a different case, Chen had publicly scolded Bondi for a minor procedural error, turning it into a spectacle he was betting she'd remember and falter. But Pam Bondi didn't falter. She didn't even blink. She turned a page in her notebook, her pen moving with deliberate calm, as if writing his downfall. Opening arguments began. The prosecution spoke. First, Chen gave them free rein, letting their statements drift into speculation without objection. He nodded, occasionally tossing and clarifying questions that sounded like encouragement. But when Bondi stood to respond, the room turned cold. Every sentence she started was cut off. Every legal citation was questioned. Every objection was dismissed before she could finish. Chen's interruptions were relentless, his tone dripping with scorn. "Ms. Bondi, do you understand evidence rules?" he snapped, drawing a stifled gasp in the gallery. Bond, his face stayed calm, her voice never wavered. But on her legal pad, her pen told a different story. A vertical line split the page to the right in neat handwriting. She logged every slight, every irregularity. Objection denied, no basis given. Prosecution speculation allowed, defense motion blocked. She wasn't just defending her client, she was building a case against the judge himself. By mid-morning, the reporters had noticed. Their typing grew frantic. A juror in the back row, a middle-aged man with wire-rimmed glasses, started watching Chen more than the lawyers. The air crackled with unspoken questions. What was Bondi doing? Why wasn't she pushing back harder? At 11:04 a.m., during a brief recess, a woman slipped into the courtroom, gray blazer, no purse, just a slim black folio and a Department of Justice badge around her neck. Chen didn't notice. His focus stayed on Bondi, his target for the day. When court resumed, Chen didn't wait for Bondi to stand. "Ms. Bondi," he said, his voice sharper now, "let's keep your arguments concise. I trust we don't need a refresher on evidence law." The jab was meant to sting. Bondi didn't bite. "Understood, Your Honor," she said, her tone smooth as glass. "Ill proceed to our first item." But the damage was piling up, not to Bondi, but to Chen. By 11:27 a.m., he had sustained 4 prosecution objections without clarification. He had dismissed all 3 of Bond as often with a wave of his hand. His bias was no longer subtle. It was a spotlight. "Bondi, finish your statement," only to be cut off again. "Well, break for lunch," Chen announced. "Ms. Bondi, I suggest you consider a plea deal for your client." The prosecution's lead attorney smirked. Thinking today was as Bondi didn't respond. She gathered her notes slowly, deliberately, her face showing nothing. Her counsel placed a new folder on the table, thicker than the others, its cover stamped with a federal seal. Chen, stepping down from the bench, didn't glance at it. He had no idea what was coming. Court resumed at 1:30 p.m. The atmosphere, electric word had spread during lunch. Something big was brewing in Courtroom. For the gallery was packed, standing room only, reporters, whisper phones buzzing with updates. Chen climbed the bench with the same theatrical flair, his half smile aimed at Bondi. "Ms. Bondi," he said, his voice almost purring, "I reviewed your filings. I'm struggling to follow your reasoning. Perhaps you can enlighten us with your unique precedent interpretation. Soft laughs rippled to the gallery. The prosecution's table buzzed with smug whispers. Bondi stood, unruffled. "I'd be happy to elaborate, Your Honor." She said the precedent in Harrison versus Miller. Chen cut her off. "Really, Ms. Bondi, that case was dismantled by the 11th Circuit. Last year, ID expect a former Attorney General to keep up his words were a deliberate slap, but they were wrong. He had confused Harrison versus Miller with Harris versus Millbrook, a mistake any law student would catch." The gallery stirred. A reporter in the front row scribbled furiously. Bondi didn't hesitate. She turned a page in her binder and placed a document on the evidence. "Cart, Your Honor," she said, her voice calm, but firm. "ID refer the court to page 17 of our supplemental filing, which distinguishes the cases. And for the record, the 11th Circuit upheld Harrison versus Miller. The case Your Honor cited was Harris versus Millbrook." Chen didn't correct himself. He didn't look at the document note. "Your objection," he said, brushing it off. "It won't affect the outcome," but the room felt different. A juror in the front row glanced at her neighbor. The court reporter's fingers paused briefly in the back. The DOJ observer closed her folio and began typing on her phone, her face focused. Bond's tone sharpened just enough to notice. "Your Honor," she said, "before we proceed, I request the court acknowledge today's irregularities. In entering a summary of procedural discrepancies observed this morning." She slid a document to the clerk, her movements precise. Chen's face tightened. "Ms. Bondi," he snapped, "this courtroom doesn't accommodate grievances. It upholds the law." "I agree, Your Honor." Bondi replied, her voice steady as a blade. "That's why we're documenting this behavior for the record. Note whatever you wish." Chen said, his fingers brushing the bench. "It won't change your case's weakness." The gallery wasn't laughing anymore. The air was heavy, charged with what was unfolding. Bondi turned to her counselor, who handed her a new binder. From it, she withdrew a copy of the Judicial Code of Conduct and opened on the podium Canon 2. She read aloud, her voice clear. "A judge shall avoid impropriety and its appearance in all activities." Canon 3. "A judge shall perform judicial duties impartially and diligently." Chen's eyes narrowed. "Are you accusing this court of violating conduct?" "Ms. Bondi, I'm entering specific actions and statements from the day that may constitute violations." She said, "The final assessment isn't mine to make." That was the moment the courtroom changed. It wasn't loud, but it was seismic. Bondi wasn't just enduring Chen's attacks. She was dismantling him with surgical precision. Over the next 20 minutes, she listed every interruption, every denied motion, every irregularity. She cited timestamps. She referenced transcript lines. Her voice never rose, but it carried like thunder. Chen tried to regain control. He dismissed another objection, his voice louder, almost desperate. He reminded the defense of the court's authority. But the room wasn't listening the way it had that morning. Reporters typed furiously. Jurors stared. The DOJ observer was no longer alone. Two men in dark suits with earpieces had joined their eyes on the bench. At 2:11 p.m., Bondi moved to admit an evidence packet marked Exhibit B. "Your Honor," she said, "this contains 3 filings made to the clerk's office over the past 4 months, all related to judicial conduct concerns, all missing from the court's digital record." Chen froze. "That's not possible," he said, his voice tight. "It's verified by the Department of Justice." Bondi replied, "As of this morning." They know the deletion. Silence gripped the room. The DOJ observer was standing now, conferred with the 2 men. Bondi pressed on, her voice calm. "Additionally, we're entering financial records communications and testimony indicating a pattern of behavior warranting federal review." Chen's voice rose almost shrill. "Ms. Bondi, this is a court of law, not a stage for theatrics. You're close to contempt." Bondi didn't flinch. "Understood, Your Honor," she said. "But as an officer of this court, I'm required to report evidence suggesting impropriety or misconduct by a judiciary member." The courtroom was a powder keg. Bondi opened another folder. "This contains bank records and meeting logs between Your Honor and Graham Industries, CEO of a party with direct financial interest in this case." She paused, letting the words sink in. "This is a recusal request filed under Title 28, Section 455 of the United States Code. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated. Subscribe for more powerful video."